A struggling student gave up her seat for an old lady, unaware her grandson was a millionaire who'd fall for her kindness. The bus screeched to a halt, tires skidding on the rain-slicked pavement as passengers jostled forward. The air inside was thick with damp coats, impatience, and the sour scent of a long day. Every seat was filled, and the aisle was packed shoulder to shoulder with people clinging to poles and overhead rails. It was rush hour in the city, a time when compassion thinned and everyone just wanted to get home. Elena adjusted the heavy backpack on her shoulders, the canvas soaked through in patches. She had just left her part-time shift at the diner, where she'd been on her feet for 6 hours straight, her legs aching and stomach rumbling. Her classes that morning hadn't helped either. 3 lectures, 2 quizzes, 1 exhausting group project. She hadn't sat down in hours, and yet she remained standing, wedged between 2 strangers, trying not to sway as the driver took another sharp turn. At the next stop, the doors wheezed open and a gust of cold air swept in, bringing with it a small, hunched figure. An elderly woman stepped aboard, gripping a cane with one hand and the rail with the other. Her coat looked far too thin for the weather, and her knit hat sat askew atop white, trembling hair. No one moved. The woman stood in the middle of the bus, her eyes scanning the rows of seats with faint hope. Passengers stared at their phones, out the window, at their feet, anywhere but at her. Even those in the priority seating section avoided her gaze. Then a voice rang out, loud, sharp, and unmistakably mocking. "Grandma, these days everyone takes care of themselves first. Don't you see?" A young man, probably in his 20s, reclined in his seat just a few feet away, smirking. He wore designer sneakers and earbuds dangling around his neck, clearly enjoying his little performance. A few people chuckled under their breath. Most remained silent. Elena's eyes flashed. She turned, her voice cutting through the air, not loud but sharp with conviction. "If you have enough energy to mock someone weaker than you," she said clearly, "then you have enough strength to stand up." The smirk vanished. The young man looked at her, stunned. A few heads turned. Elena stepped forward without waiting for a response. "Come on, ma'am," she said softly, offering her arm. "Please, take my spot." The old woman blinked, surprised. "Oh, no, dear, you don't have to. I insist." Elena smiled, steadying her. "I'm tired, but I'm not elderly. You should sit." She gently helped the woman into her seat, then stepped back toward the front of the bus, gripping a nearby pole to steady herself. The old woman clutched the seat, then reached out and took Elena's hand briefly, her voice soft and tremulous. "You are so kind. Maybe I am still lucky to have met you." Elena gave her a faint smile. "Everyone needs help sometimes. That's not weakness, it's just life." Behind her, a man in his 50s, wearing a gray windbreaker, muttered under his breath, just loud enough to hear. "Girls like that do it for attention, trying to be a hero for show." Elena turned her head slightly. Her voice was calm, but her words were pointed. "I'm not performing for anyone," she said, "but if kindness offends you, maybe it's time to ask yourself why." The bus went silent. For a moment there was no sound except the hum of the engine and the rhythmic squeak of windshield wipers against glass. A teenage girl looked up from her phone. A man in a business suit shifted uncomfortably. Someone at the back whispered, "Good for her." The elderly woman watched Elena with quiet admiration, her eyes glistening. There was something rare in the girl's face, strength, tempered by gentleness, a fire that didn't burn, but warmed. No one on that crowded bus knew that this old woman wasn't just another fragile commuter. No one knew that she was the grandmother of one of the city's most elusive young millionaires, a man who rarely appeared in public, who trusted almost no one, and who cherished his grandmother above all else. And no one, not even Elena, knew that this small moment of humanity would ripple across her life like a stone cast into still water. She didn't do it for recognition. She didn't do it for thanks. She just did it because it was right. And somewhere, in a quiet home on the edge of the city, a phone would ring, and a kind old woman would say, with a trembling voice and a heart full of pride, "My dear, today I met a girl who made me believe that there are still good people in the world. And so the story would begin. Elena unlocked the door to her apartment with the kind of quiet practiced only by those who live alone in thin-walled buildings. The hallway light flickered as she stepped inside. Her room, a single-window studio tucked above a laundromat, was barely big enough for a twin mattress, a second-hand desk, and a hot plate. She dropped her soaked backpack near the door and peeled off her shoes. The soles were wearing thin. She made a mental note to add duct tape to her next grocery list. Again. The clock blinked 8:42 p.m. She had exactly 18 minutes before she needed to head out to her second job. Elena crossed the room and pulled open the small cabinet above her sink. 3 packs of instant noodles, 1 half-empty jar of peanut butter, and a bag of rice. She reached for the noodles and set water to boil. As she waited, she peeled off her cafe uniform, now permanently stained at the sleeves, and changed into a plain gray t-shirt and black slacks. Her night shift at the downtown office building started at 9:30, 2 floors to mop, 5 bathrooms to clean, and 3 long hours of solitude. While the noodles softened, Elena pulled a tattered notebook from her bag and flipped it open. Handwritten notes lined the pages. Terms, diagrams, highlighted headers in different colors. She read as she ate, chopsticks in one hand, pen in the other. The pages smelled faintly of coffee and floor cleaner. It had been like this for 3 years. She was a third-year nursing student. The dream had always been there, ever since she sat beside her mother's hospital bed, clutching her hand through long nights of fever and fatigue. Her mother, smiling even when her body was failing, always said, "You'd make a good nurse, sweetie. You've got gentle hands." Her mother died before Elena turned 15. Her father left 2 months later. Elena had raised her younger sister ever since. It hadn't been a question, it was just something she had to do. She worked every spare hour she could find, waiting tables in the afternoons, scrubbing floors and emptying trash bins at night. Every paycheck was divided with precision: rent, tuition, books, and the most important part, money wired home for her sister's school fees, shoes, and meals. Tonight, her hands trembled from exhaustion as she finished her meal, but she kept studying. Exams were next week. The heater in the corner coughed once and went silent. She pulled her sleeves over her hands and leaned closer to the lamp. The world never made space for girls like her, so she made space for herself. Despite everything, Elena never stopped helping others. She walked her elderly landlady's groceries upstairs every Saturday. She covered shifts for co-workers without asking for favors in return. She once gave her only winter coat to a classmate who couldn't afford one, saying she had a backup, though she didn't. She didn't see these acts as kindness. To her, they were survival, just not her own. The bus earlier that day had been no different. Giving up her seat had cost her nothing but a few minutes of discomfort, but it gave someone else a moment of rest. That was always worth it. Her phone buzzed. A message from her sister. "Sis, I got a perfect score in math today. The teacher said I was very good." Elena smiled, her eyes stinging. She typed back quickly, "I'm so proud of you. Keep up the good work. I'm always here for you." She closed her notebook, wiped her eyes, and grabbed her cleaning supplies from the closet. There would be no applause for the life she lived, no spotlight, no miracle, just Elena, stepping back out into the rain, tired but steady. And somewhere, unbeknownst to her, that simple moment on the bus, her small act of kindness, was echoing beyond her little apartment, because kindness, like her, never asked to be noticed. But sometimes, the world notices anyway. The scent of freshly ground coffee drifted through the expansive kitchen, bouncing softly off the marble countertops and stainless steel appliances. A wall of floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the edge of the city skyline, glittering beneath the early morning haze. But Liam didn't notice. He was too busy scrolling through back-to-back emails on his tablet, investor meetings, product launch delays, a conference keynote in Singapore next month. Every line demanded something from him: attention, answers, presence. Yet somehow, despite the noise, his world remained quiet. Too quiet. Liam Whitmore, 30 years old, founder and CEO of a billion-dollar tech startup, lived in one of the most expensive penthouses in the city. His name appeared in Forbes, TechCrunch, and Business Insider more often than he cared to count. His home was filled with rare art, designer furniture, and cutting-edge devices, but none of it felt like home. Across from him at the breakfast nook, a small, wrinkled hand reached out and placed a teacup on the table with practiced care. "You need to stop living like you're made of wires, not blood," said the soft voice of his grandmother, Margaret Whitmore. He looked up, finally setting the tablet down. "I'm flesh and blood, Grandma, just very caffeinated." Margaret gave him a look, one that had managed to silence boardroom arrogance and teenage rebellion alike. Liam smiled, just a little. "I saw someone yesterday," she said, stirring honey into her tea. "On the bus." He raised an eyebrow. "You took the bus?" She ignored his tone. "I needed a reminder of how people really live. It's easy to forget up here." He leaned back, intrigued despite himself. "So? What did you see?" Margaret's eyes softened as the memory returned. A girl, young, clearly exhausted, probably coming from work. But when no one else moved, she stood up and gave me her seat. Not out of pity, not out of obligation, just kindness. Liam tilted his head. "And the guy who mocked you?" She smiled faintly. She shut him down too, with more grace than anger. There was something in her, strength, but soft, fire, but gentle. He blinked. "Okay, now I'm curious. Who is this mythical bus angel?" "I don't know her name," Margaret replied. "But I know the world would be better if more people were like her." Liam chuckled, pouring himself another cup of coffee. "You've never told me this much about a stranger before." Margaret leaned closer, her voice quiet. "You live in a world of algorithms and strategy, Liam. But don't forget, sometimes the smallest moments reveal the greatest character." He didn't respond, but something about her words lingered long after breakfast ended. 2 days later, Liam found himself at his old university, invited to speak at a leadership seminar. He walked across the campus he had once hurried through as a broke student, now wearing a tailored suit and a badge that read Keynote Speaker. It was supposed to be a quick event. In and out, smile, shake hands, offer inspiration, move on. Liam wasn't expecting to see her. He had just finished his seminar when he spotted a girl across the campus quad, kneeling to tie a younger student's shoe that had come undone. Something about her stopped him. Her gentle posture, the loose dark waves of her hair pulled into a tired bun, the quiet confidence in her movements. Then he remembered his grandmother's words from weeks ago. "It was near your old university." She had the kindest eyes I've ever seen, like they'd seen pain, but chose softness anyway. Her hair was dark and messy, but beautiful in a natural, unbothered way. His heart thudded. The bus route, the time of day, the way the girl smiled at a stranger, everything aligned. He didn't need a name. He didn't need proof. As he watched her help someone without hesitation, he knew. This was the girl who had changed his grandmother's day and who was quietly changing his. It was her. The girl from the bus. The girl from his grandmother's story. Liam stopped mid-step, watching as she bent down to help a classmate pick up spilled papers near the library entrance. No hesitation, just kindness, effortless and sincere. In that moment, Liam realized his grandmother hadn't exaggerated a word. There was something about this girl, this stranger, who moved through the world like it still mattered. He didn't know her name, but he suddenly wanted to, not for business, not for PR, but for something far rarer in his world, something real. The sign-up sheet was taped crookedly to the bulletin board outside the student center. Liam stood staring at it longer than necessary, one hand buried deep in his jacket pocket, the other holding a ballpoint pen he hadn't used in years. Community Outreach Week, volunteer needed, Public Health and Wellness Fair, help us make a difference. It was the perfect entry point. He scribbled a name that wasn't quite his, Will Monroe, and added his number. He hadn't used a fake name since middle school prank calls. But this wasn't about deception, not really. He just wanted to know her without the weight of who he was, and so the next morning, he arrived at the campus gymnasium wearing jeans, a plain hoodie, and the most unassuming pair of sneakers he owned. "Hi," said a soft voice behind him. "You're new?" He turned. Alina stood holding a clipboard, hair pulled back, sleeves rolled up. Even in simple clothes, there was something about her. Open, steady, real. "I'm Will," he said quickly, hoping his voice didn't betray anything more. "First time volunteering?" She smiled, nodding. "Welcome. I'm Elena." He knew that already, of course. He'd heard someone call her name 2 days ago outside the library and had filed it away like a secret treasure. But hearing it from her lips felt different. They spent the next few hours sorting pamphlets, setting up first aid stations, and organizing free wellness kits. Liam tried to keep up, but Elena moved with effortless rhythm. Efficient, focused, kind to everyone. "You're doing great," she said once, watching him fumble with a box of face masks. "You ever worked one of these before?" He laughed, scratching the back of his neck. "Nope, but I'm good at pretending." Alina chuckled, and the sound struck him, light and genuine, like something unfiltered. "You don't have to pretend with me," she said. "We're all just doing our best." That sentence stayed with him. They ended up partnering for the vision screening booth, where Elena taught him how to guide patients through a simple eye chart. "Hold this." She handed him a clipboard. He took it, trying to hide the way his fingers brushed hers. "You're kind of clumsy," she teased, her tone light. "And you're kind of bossy," he countered. Their eyes met. They both smiled. It became a rhythm. Every afternoon, Liam showing up with sleeves rolled and fake name ready, Elena greeting him with a nod and an extra task. They handed out flyers, helped elderly visitors through forms, even organized a raffle for free flu shots. Each day, Liam learned something new. Elena didn't drink coffee after 5 p.m. She loved old movies and collected quotes from classic books in the back of her note. He was terrible at remembering where she put her pen, but never forgot a name or a face. And she never once asked about his past, his background, his bank account. She just listened, saw people, saw him. One afternoon, after everyone else had left, Liam stayed behind to help Elena pack up the last few boxes. As she folded a banner, she looked over at him and said, "You know, Will, you don't talk much about yourself." He hesitated, then shrugged. "Not much to say." She studied him for a moment, then smiled. "Well, I think you're a good person, and I'm glad you're here." Liam felt something shift inside him. This wasn't curiosity anymore. He was drawn to her, for who she was, not how she made him feel, but because of what she brought out in him. Something honest, something human. And for the first time in years, Liam wasn't thinking about business plans or market shares. He was thinking about the girl who gave up her seat on the bus, and how she might have just taken up space in his heart. The message came in the middle of her shift. Elena was wiping down tables at the cafe when her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. It was from her neighbor back home. A panicked voice note. Her hands trembled as she played it. "My sister. She had an accident. Hit by a motorbike. She's in the emergency room, district hospital. It's urgent, Elena." Her world narrowed to that single sentence. The mop in her hand slipped. Her knees nearly buckled. The hum of the cafe, the clatter of cups, the laughter, it all faded. That night, Elena called every relative, every friend back home, but no one had enough. Her savings, what little she had left after rent and tuition, wasn't close to what her sister's surgery would cost. She stopped showing up to her cleaning job. She called in sick to the cafe. Her eyes were sunken, her steps slow, but she kept going to class, kept volunteering, only because she couldn't let herself collapse. Not yet. She tried to smile through it. She told no one the truth, except once, when Will caught her staring at a flyer for medical assistance grants. He tilted his head, concerned. "Everything okay?" She hesitated, then forced a smile. "Just tired." He didn't push. But something in her voice tugged at something deep inside him. That night, Liam made a call. He didn't tell his assistant why. He didn't need to. The next morning, a discreet email landed in the university's scholarship department inbox. Anonymous emergency grant. Transfer $5,000 to student ID 2000. 194. Reason: verified family medical hardship. Source: Community Resilience Fund. It was signed with a logo no one had seen before, because Liam had just made it up. 2 days later, Elena received an email that nearly made her drop her phone. Subject: Emergency scholarship awarded, no repayment required. She read it once, then again, then sat down on the edge of her bed and cried into her pillow for what felt like hours. No one knew. No one was supposed to know. But someone out there, had seen her, had helped her. Not with conditions or expectations, but with quiet compassion. At the next volunteer session, Elena arrived early, her eyes still puffy but her steps lighter. Will was there unpacking boxes of brochures. He looked up and smiled softly. "Hey," he said, "you okay?" This time, she didn't fake it. She walked up to him and said, voice trembling, "I just want to say thank you. I don't know who did it, but someone helped me, helped my sister, and I'll never forget it." Liam looked at her for a long moment. He wanted so badly to tell her, "It was me. I couldn't bear to see you break." But he said only, "Some people give what they can. Some people give what they are." She blinked, stunned by the gentleness in his voice. "That sounds like a quote." "Maybe," he said, "or maybe I just made it up." Liam watched her walk away to greet a patient, his heart heavy and full all at once. This wasn't admiration anymore. This wasn't interest or even curiosity. This was love, the kind that made you want to shield someone from the world's sharp edges, even if they never knew it was you holding the shield. But Liam still couldn't bring himself to tell her who he really was. Not yet. Not when her trust meant more than anything his name could buy. It started with a headline. Elena was skimming articles during her break in the campus library when one particular photo made her stop cold. Her thumb hovered above the screen, heart suddenly in her throat. Liam Whitmore, tech prodigy, young billionaire, and the city's most reclusive CEO. She blinked. The face in the article. It was him. Her Will, the same Will who fumbled boxes at the wellness fair, who stuttered when handing out hand sanitizer, who listened to her talk about her sister and late-night shifts without ever judging. Only he hadn't been Will at all. He had been lying to her from the start. The article went on. About his fortune, his startup, his estate near the city, his rare public appearances. There were photos, polished, powerful, and in every one Liam looked like a stranger. Sharp suit, cold eyes. The kind of man who didn't ride buses. The kind of man who didn't need to pretend. Elena's hands began to shake. She thought of the little things. The way he never gave details, how he always listened but rarely shared, the mysterious scholarship, the gentle compliments, that keychain. Tiny, simple, a heart-shaped trinket he'd once shyly handed her during a cleanup shift, saying, "It reminded me of you, quiet but strong." Now it felt like a prop. That night she placed the keychain on his empty chair at the volunteer desk and walked away. She ignored his texts. She skipped every outreach shift. She needed air, distance, time. But the hurt didn't fade. It deepened. Why would someone like him lie? Why approach her under a fake name? Was it all just some game? A way to amuse himself with the struggling student who didn't know any better? She didn't cry, not because it didn't hurt, but because the tears would have meant she'd believed in something real. 2 days later, Elena sat alone at the back of the campus library, surrounded by nursing books she wasn't reading. Her fingers traced the corner of a page, but her mind wandered, until she felt a presence beside her. "I'm sorry," said a voice she hadn't heard in days. She looked up. Liam stood there, no longer Will, no longer fumbling, awkward, hidden, just Liam, wealthy, composed, honest, and nervous. "I didn't come here to make excuses," he said softly. "Just to tell the truth." She didn't answer. She couldn't trust her voice. "I first heard about you from my grandmother. She wouldn't stop talking about the girl on the bus," he said, smiling faintly. "And I wanted to meet you, not as me, because people treat me differently when they know who I am." Elena folded her arms, holding herself steady. "So you lied." "I didn't mean to. I liked being someone you could meet without expectations." She shook her head, bitterness cutting through. "You think it's romantic? Pretending to be someone else? Making me feel like I could trust you while you watched from behind a mask? No, he said, voice firmer now. I think it was cowardly, and I regret it. But everything I said to you, every moment, every word, was real. He sat down, careful not to crowd her. I didn't know I'd fall for you, Elena. I didn't know that your strength, your kindness, would change me. But it did. Her eyes welled despite herself. You don't understand what it's like, she whispered. People like you, money, power, you can afford to pretend. People like me don't get that luxury. We live with truth every day, because if we slip, we lose everything. He nodded slowly. You're right, and I never should have put you in that position. They sat in silence, the gap between them filled with words unspoken. Finally, Liam reached into his coat and gently set something on the table between them. The heart-shaped keychain. I never meant for this to be a joke, he said, but if you want to walk away, I'll understand. Just know that I never cared about how much you had, only who you were. Elena looked down at the little heart. She didn't pick it up, but she didn't push it away either. The knock came just after sunrise. Elena had just poured hot water into a chipped mug of instant coffee when she heard it. Soft but steady, like someone patient enough to wait all day if needed. She opened the door to find a woman she recognized immediately. Miss Elena? The older woman offered a warm, reserved smile. She wore a long navy coat, a silk scarf tucked neatly beneath her collar, and carried herself with the kind of grace that didn't need to be announced. Yes, you're Liam's grandmother, Elena said, a bit stunned. Margaret nodded. May I come in for a moment? Inside the tiny apartment, the older woman didn't look uncomfortable, despite the modest surroundings. She sat carefully at the small kitchen table, her gloved hands folded in her lap, taking in the stacks of nursing books and the bowl of instant noodles on the counter. I'm not here to speak for Liam, she said gently, but I am here because of him. Elena stayed silent, unsure what to expect. Margaret's eyes softened, her voice lowering like she was sharing something sacred. My grandson has always been brilliant, but after his parents passed and the business grew faster than any of us could follow, he became guarded, distrustful. He's been burned by people who only saw his money. She paused, choosing her words carefully. But a few months ago, he came to my kitchen and said, Grandma, tell me again about the girl on the bus. And that's when I knew. Elena's throat tightened. He heard me talk about you more times than I can count, Margaret said with a soft smile. The way you stood up, literally and figuratively, for someone you didn't know. You reminded him that goodness still exists in the world, and it made him want to be closer to it. I didn't know who he was, Elena murmured. And when I found out, it felt like everything we shared wasn't real. I understand, Margaret nodded. And I won't defend the fact that he hid his name, but I will say this. He never once hid his heart. Elena blinked, her eyes stinging. Margaret reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a faded photo. It had been printed from a bus security camera. Elena recognized herself instantly, standing next to the seated older woman, her hand resting lightly on the cane, mid-smile. A timestamp in the corner marked the moment. 5:41 p.m., nearly 3 months ago. Margaret looked at her. Some people give up their seat. Some people change someone's entire direction, she said quietly. You did both. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of it all resting gently between them. Margaret finally rose, her movements graceful. He's waiting, you know. Same park, same bench. Elena clutched the photo after she left, staring at it long after the door clicked shut. Her chest was full of memories, of confusion, of something deeper than anger. She hadn't just been hurt because of the lie. She'd been hurt because she had started to care, because she had let herself imagine more. And now, maybe there was still more waiting for her. She picked up her phone, heart pounding, and typed, If there's still a seat next to you, I'd like to sit. The park was nearly empty when she arrived. Winter was giving way to spring, and the air smelled of new grass and quiet promises. Elena spotted him immediately, sitting on the same bench where they had once shared peanut butter granola bars and laughed over clumsy hand sanitizer spills. Liam stood as she approached. He looked different. Same person, same eyes. But the nervousness was gone. He looked like someone who had stopped pretending. "Elena," he said quietly. She gave him a half-smile. "Hey." He started to speak, but she held up a hand, reached into her coat pocket, and pulled out something small, the keychain. "I didn't know what it meant when you gave it to me," she said, placing it in his open palm, "but I do now, and I think it still belongs with you." He stared at it for a second, then looked up. "Elena, I never meant to." "I know," she said. "That's the thing. I believe you now." She paused, then added, voice gentler, "But next time, tell me who you are from the beginning." "I will," he promised. "Always." They sat side by side on the bench, their shoulders brushing. Liam looked at her, his voice low but steady. "I don't want perfect, I want honest, and I want you." Elena met his gaze, her heart steady for the first time in weeks. "You have me," she said. "Just, maybe no more fake names, okay?" He laughed, relief and joy washing over his face, and when she reached for his hand this time, he didn't flinch. Because now they were holding something real. The afternoon sun cast a soft, golden glow across the garden courtyard of Rose Hill Retirement Center. Wisteria vines curled around wooden trellises. Folding chairs lined the cobblestone path, each one occupied by a silver-haired guest in their Sunday best, their faces lit with childlike wonder. It was not the kind of place most people imagined for a wedding, but for Elena and Liam, it was perfect. This was where Elena had volunteered during her first year of nursing school. She had read bedtime stories to residents who had long outlived their children. She had painted fingernails, danced slowly in wheelchairs to Frank Sinatra, and held trembling hands during long, lonely afternoons. And now she had brought love back here, not only her own, but enough to fill the room. "Is this really happening?" she whispered to Liam, clutching his arm just outside the small stone archway. He looked down at her, smiling softly. "It's happening, and you've never looked more beautiful." She wore a simple ivory dress, no lace, no train, no extravagance. Her hair was curled loosely, pinned with a single white rose. Liam wore a dark blue suit with a boutonniere that matched. No one in the press knew. There were no influencers, no luxury photographers, no brands desperate for a feature, just love, and a quiet kind of magic that didn't need to be broadcast to be real. Margaret sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief, her cane resting against her knee. Around her sat more than 24 residents, Elena's old friends, Mr. Han with his harmonica in his breast pocket, Miss Lillian beaming in her flower hat, and sweet old Thomas, who insisted on walking her down the aisle like a proper lady deserves. When the music started, gentle piano chords played by one of the staff, Elena walked slowly down the path, hand on Thomas's arm, her eyes locked on Liam's. And when she reached him, and he took her hand, the world seemed to exhale. The ceremony was short. No long readings, no rehearsed speeches, just two people standing in front of those who mattered most, exchanging truths from the deepest part of themselves. Liam took her hands, his voice steady but full of emotion. "I spent a long time thinking that trust had to be earned through fear, and that love was just a transaction with better packaging," he began. A soft murmur of agreement came from some of the older men in the crowd. "But then I met you, and you gave everything, your seat, your time, your heart, without ever expecting anything back. You taught me something I never learned in boardrooms or headlines." He paused, his eyes misty. "Thank you for showing me that kindness is the most valuable thing we ever own." There was a long moment of silence before the clapping began. Slow, reverent, building until even the nurses behind the crowd were wiping their eyes. Then it was Elena's turn. Her voice shook at first, but her grip on his hands stayed firm. "I never thought I'd be standing here," she whispered. "I used to think love belonged to people with more money, more stability, more time. I didn't think there was room for someone like me." She looked around at the audience, at all the wrinkled smiles and teary eyes. "But then I stood up, just once, for someone I didn't know, and that simple choice changed everything." she looked back at Liam. "I didn't know a seat could lead to a heart, or that one small act would become the beginning of my forever." The audience erupted into quiet sobs and wide smiles as Elena and Liam leaned forward and sealed their vows with a kiss, gentle, sure, and real. Then came the music. Soft jazz filled the garden as Liam offered his hand. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Whitmore?" "You better," she teased. "I practiced." Their first dance wasn't perfect. There were stumbles, little laughs, a few too many spins, but no one cared. The silver-hazed audience clapped and cheered with the glee of children, some swaying in their seats, others wiping away tears. Margaret leaned over to a nurse and whispered, "See? I told him she was special." A handmade sign hung just outside the archway where they'd exchanged vows. It was small, painted on wood with slightly uneven letters, but everyone stopped to read it as they left. Sometimes, the smallest act of kindness opens the door to the greatest kind of love. And as the sun dipped behind the horizon, casting the world in soft light and long shadows, Liam and Elena stood together in a garden full of stories, both old and new. A girl who once gave up her seat, a boy who had everything but heart, and a love that asked for nothing but gave them everything. Sometimes, all it takes is one small act, one seat given, one moment of kindness, and from that a story begins, not of fame or fortune, but of two hearts brave enough to love without asking for anything in return. Elena and Liam's journey reminds us, you never know who's watching when you choose to be kind, and you never know how that kindness might change the course of your life forever. If this story touched your heart, if it made you smile, reflect, or shed a quiet tear, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to Soul-Stirring Stories. Here, we tell tales that warm the soul, celebrate compassion, and remind you of the beauty in ordinary moments. Because sometimes the most powerful stories begin with something as simple as standing up for someone else. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay kind, stay human.